My name is Dan Orkin. I'm a co-founder here at Envision Blockchain. And today we're going to be talking about how to keep your preferred system of record and still make sure that we can work together. Really quickly about us, and this is going to make sense as we get into some of the slides here today. So without further ado, let's get into the agenda. And what we're going to be talking about here today, we're going to try to keep it simple into three specific agenda points. The first one is we're going to be talking about, what are the top questions or the top question that we hear from our clients. Then we're also going to do a review of cross-organizational value chains and the importance of systems of record. Lastly, what we're going to be doing is talking a little bit about what's being done today to solve the problems that we hear from the clients and some of the challenges that we see in cross-organizational value chains. There's work that we want to be able to highlight here that is going on in the industry, and it sure is going to be important to just keep up to date with everything. So, here we just kind of opened up 2020, but just to kind of go over this, in 2019, we worked with over 30 different companies of all different sizes. And what we were talking about before as the business model that Envision Blockchain has from a full service consultancy and a blockchain system integrator, we really like to help out on what we call three different milestones, if you will. So one of them is ideation, the other one is the build phase, and obviously once you've ideated and you've built, then we need to support. So, what we've heard from our clients that we're about to share in the next couple slides really comes from some of these ideation and build phases, right? Because the value is right in the lean methodology. The value is, not when you close a deal, right? But it's when you get customer feedback that comes back, right? We want to know, what can we do to improve, or what can the industry do to improve? And we really get that through, these three different phases. So, we're really looking forward to, all the experience that we've been accumulating over the past couple of years. Envision Blockchain has been open since 2018. And, in the past couple of years, working with these organizations, we really gathered a whole bunch of lessons learned. So just kind of looking ahead, the past few years of lessons learned, it's just hard to ignore these facts that blockchain has a really dramatic effect on the way that businesses work together. Whether you're in private blockchain or public blockchain, the one thing is for sure is that blockchain has the potential to really improve efficiencies, really improve business processes. And, some of the values that we all thought when we first heard about blockchain, whether that's in, if you were fortunate to hear about it from, the early days back in, let's say 2008 and 9, 10, or maybe when, Ethereum was launched back in 2015, or maybe you joined in 2017 or 2018, or, you're just catching up right now. You're hearing that there's transparency values. You're hearing that there's auditability values and security and efficiency and immutability. And all of that is true. The fact that once something gets written to the ledger and it can't be removed, the fact that there's this trail of what happened and the tracing ability, the fact that it makes it very, very difficult in order to hack. But at the same time, you still have the transparency value so that, the businesses can operate in this way that is, as transparent as could be. Some folks like to say it's beyond trust, but it's operating at this level, right? And this is for sure. And what we've seen over the past couple of years is this massive industry adoption that it's just, in every sector, in every area, you're seeing that there's proof of concepts, different MVP builds that are just coming up all over the place, from insurance to media and education and energy and healthcare, finance, transportation, retail, supply chain, manufacturing, food and beverage, and real estate. And I'm sure that there's more that I haven't even mentioned over here. And we're seeing, this kind of maturation, if you will, stepping stones, right? um, what's happening is that, these organizations are coming together and they're collaborating, if you will, and they're working to realize these sort of values and getting some sort of return on investment. And I'm going to call upon one use case assessment that we did with an organization that's in the retail industry. And we had a series of assessments together with their teams, from, the VP of strategies to the CFOs to, the emerging technology leaders and the finance departments, accounting departments, so on and so forth, right? And they got the value and they understand what's happening. And at the time, this was about a year ago, when the enterprise blockchain world was looking at private blockchains and consortium blockchains. And and we had a whiteboarding session, and the question was pretty evident, right? So let's say that there's one system of record that the retail organization was using, and let's say that they got invited to join one consortium, private blockchain, right? And then they had to onboard there, so they had to integrate their systems there. And what happens if they got invited to another consortium? Well, they have to get permissioned in there. There's all sorts of legal that has to happen there. And same thing with consortium 3, and then consortium 4, and then 5, and so on and so forth, right? So, there was a little hesitation from this organization, because they're thinking, why are we going to go ahead and spin something up ourselves when there's one of our competitors which is doing something here, and then one of our partners which is doing something here, and someone else in our supply chain is doing something there. And there was this confusion, and this is kind of where we're all at in this current state of the industry, right? The values that are being passed back and forth, it's definitely there, and there's definite benefits that organizations are seeing, but there's this there's this concern, and also part of that concern goes with this also major question. And we heard this not from just this one customer, but from every one of our clients as well. They say, well, when we're using a solution that's leveraging blockchain, can our system stay intact? Because we all know that ROI increases as user adoption increases. And when you rip a system out completely and you bring a new system in, everyone starts to get a little bit worried, right? We have old habits, we're creatures of habits, and this is just something that we need to keep in mind. How can we make our systems work together with the blockchain network, with our partners, with our supply chain, upstream, downstream, etc. Right? Because again, whenever a new solution is implemented, right, and we're just getting back to the basics of implementation, you start to see more return on your investment the more users start to use it. What's the point of implementing something if only a fraction of users take to it while others are stuck in their old ways, right? So we need to make sure that everyone's on the same page. And that's kind of starting with the end in mind, right? These are the major questions that we're seeing from our customers over the past couple of years. So why is this so important? And let's kind of go back in time. So Over the course of the past couple years, we've been putting on these sort of webinars. It's usually the last week of the month or the second to last week of the month, usually on a Wednesday or Thursday. So, we really appreciate everyone for joining, and please continue to come and listen to us. Hopefully that you get some value out of this, 30 minutes that we spend. And you see kind of, we've been talking about this really since the beginning, right? We have a webinar that we spoke about, where can you find the strategic business value of blockchain and people process technology in the 21st century, and how to connect, integrate, and interact with blockchain technology, and how and why token definitions will affect blockchain adoption, where in that presentation, what we did was we discussed, standards, and then we made comparisons to the Token Taxonomy Initiative with GS1, with EDI, so on and so forth, because these are the systems that the world is using. And IoT sensors and scanners and, ERP systems all have these standards built into them. Right. So if we just take a look at one of the webinars that we did over a year ago, and we're just going to do a quick little refresher course of that. What we did was we took a look at a value chain brought to you by Michael Porter. Right. This is textbook business discussion, nothing to do with technology just yet. But an organization, if we just look at one organization, we have supporting activities and primary activities, where in the supporting activities, you have this, firm infrastructure. This is where you see the line management, the administrative handling, financial management. You also see the HR department. This is where they're recruiting talent, they're training, this is where your compensation comes in, your bonuses, so on and so forth. You have your technology development. This is your IT department, technology innovations and improvements. And you also have your procurement department. This is where you get your suppliers, your MSAs, your services, your pricing, etc. And all that is made to, support what you primarily do. You have your inbound logistics, you have your production, so you're building something, outbound marketing and sales and service. And this is for one organization. So, the way that we did this webinar back in the day was we, asked the participants to all, think about where you sit within your organization and what kind of systems you typically use, right? And this is, again, we're just talking about one organization. And essentially, every organization has what they call legacy systems, or AKA systems of record. And in here, this is where you can really start to, drill down into what your systems are, where we have the enterprise management systems, right? And this is where you really understand what sort of M&A activities that an organization is going through, and sort of KPIs that, you can kind of monitor over the course of time. You have your financial management systems. This is what's handling your financial transactions, your accounting metrics, etc. You have your facilities management systems. This is where, you can deal with setting up and moving different working environments, if you will. You also have equipment management systems, where you talk about, the different way that, you deal with the equipment that you have to actually disperse out to your organization, and so on and so forth, right? We all kind of understand what the information management systems are, and the customer development systems, and product development systems, and supplier systems, and, we kind of get the point, right? So what's interesting is that no matter where you sit, either it's in your value chain in the firm infrastructure, HR, procurement, technology, inbound logistics, production, sales, and marketing, you're using your system of record, because your organization has tons and tons of data. And what's interesting is that we take a look at the first implementation of blockchain, which is Bitcoin, which was the transfer of wealth, where somebody through a peer-to-peer network can actually take some store of value and literally give it to somebody else without any intermediary involved. So when we're dealing with the supply chain, whatever object has been, let's say, tokenized, for example, we're doing the same kind of thing throughout the supply chain, is that the blockchain technology allows us to transfer that value of whatever that value is, whether it's an orange or coffee beans, if you will, or anything else, right? Parts or something along those lines, up and down your supply chain in a way that we can now skip the intermediaries and and start to see all the values what I talked about in the first slide. So we have now this notion in blockchain of this, joining of the forces with the cross-organizational value chains, where you have, for example, one company and another company, and you go from one value chain to the next value chain, for example, from the service to the inbound logistics. And what we're seeing over here now is that this business process among cross-organizational value chains really needs to be addressed, because the old way of doing things kind of looks like you have one organization in the yellow, another one in red, another one in blue, and as they start to send messages or information or data or objects to and from, what happens is now there's like emails and faxes and all sorts of things that can get lost in translation that needs to kind of communicate together with each other. And through the use of blockchain is really where you can kind of eliminate all of these kind of back and forths, or maybe make it in a way that is just more efficient, right? That everyone in your entire business network understands what's happening. So getting back to the system of record talk is now, if we kind of, let's say undress this value chain, right? And what we could do is kind of extrapolate this a little bit to how something could look like in this decentralized application fashion, right? So again, the major question is, do I need to get rid of all my systems? No, right? And in this simple diagram of what we're showing, for example, the company in the yellow, if you follow the data flow, it starts in this ERP system. For example, if there's an inventory management system being managed through the ERP or something along those lines, you typically have integration services, which is being, sent over to databases. And all of that is still not on the blockchain. This is all off-chain is what we call it. And then what you do, and most organizations have some sort of developers in them that understands, let's say, API technology, right? Web APIs, where information from your off-chain databases then hits this web API, that hits a blockchain adapter, and whatever information we want to either store into the blockchain or just write that transaction to the blockchain, we could do that in a way that it shows up on, let's say, a user interface, which would be the picture of, the desktop or the mobile application. Or you can even get rid of all that and just keep it right into your ERP system, right? And what's really interesting about this is that, the more organizations that you have that are part of this blockchain network, the more value that you really get from this business ecosystem. But the major takeaway that comes from looking at a diagram like this is that you probably within your organization have already started with an ERP system. If you don't, then there probably is, some sort of modernization that needs to happen within your, IT infrastructure, or maybe you just need to, move some of the workloads, for example, into cloud, or you can keep the on-prem. It really doesn't matter. What's most important is that you have this blockchain, ledger that acts as a quote unquote middleware that allows you to now communicate to anyone that needs to connect to it. But you don't need to rip out your systems in order to do that. All you need to do is just have the right set of connections to and from. And we're going to dive into, a little bit, technical here, but we're not going to get extremely too deep into this aspect. But essentially what happens is that, the way that you would connect to this blockchain network is through, an event delivery system. All right. So starting at the lower left, you have your blockchain network. And the way that you would typically look into a blockchain network is through a blockchain client. blockchain client gives you, if you want to imagine this, like a window into the blockchain environment where you can see the transactions, you can post transactions, you can, get the events that you need to, so on and so forth. Okay, so as events are happening in the blockchain network, certain events are going to hit what's called an event listener. And the event listener is just essentially doing just that. It's listening to specific events that that are relevant to whatever the use case is. Right. So as the event listener is listening, it's polling the system, and something that grabs its attention asks for that event to be looked at or grabbed, if you will. It takes that event and then it puts it to what we would call a message bus. And message bus, this is nothing new. Enterprise architects probably have their favorite message bus. You can find them in any cloud architecture that you go ahead and take a look into. But essentially, these message buses are sending events to the right backend service that is necessary in order to complete the use case. And the use case is very specific, right? So, if we remember back on the previous diagram that we had, the yellow, the red, and the blue organizations and their value chains. For example, the backend service one could be the ERP system of that organization. And then same thing with the red one, right? It connects to that red backend service, and then so on and so forth, right? So that's kind of the major takeaway from this chat over here, is that you don't need to re-engineer all of your systems. All you need to do is connect it in a way that allows you to interact with all the business participants that you need. Now, the architecture of that blockchain network, that's something that we can definitely discuss. And there's definitely pros and cons for many different, let's say, architecture designs. The next agenda point here to talk about is kind of the work that's being done right now. And if you followed Envision Blockchain in the past, and if you come to any of our webinars that I see a number of familiar faces here, you hear us constantly talking about the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance is a member-driven organization that is focused on standards, specifically within the Ethereum community. Okay, so there's Enterprise Ethereum, which is the private Ethereum, and then there's Ethereum Mainnet, which is what we're going to talk about next. What's being done right now for this specific initiative that I'm talking about here is, I want to say, about half a year ago, back in August, the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance just announced that that there was a new Mainnet Initiative. So the Ethereum Foundation joined the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance, and they launched what's called as the Mainnet Initiative. The main focus on the Mainnet Initiative is to take a look at how enterprise organizations can, start to look at the public blockchain, which is called Mainnet, and how they could start to use that for their purpose, right? So if we take a look at what's being done within that Mainnet working group, you see that there's the top level, which is the Mainnet working group. And then there are 4 different task forces that has spun up. There's been a couple proposals for more, but let's just focus on these 4 for right now. There's an education task force, which focuses on literally what that sounds like, educating the enterprise community on the benefits of public blockchain. The use case task force, which focuses on what different use cases and what different non-functional requirements are important in the in Mainnet for enterprise organizations to start adopting that, as well as the technical specification task force, which takes a look at, again, how can we make sure that security, interoperability, so on and so forth. All of these technical specifications are written to the clients that I was just talking about before, your window to the blockchain to be able to interact with it. How can we write code in such a way that enterprise organizations are going to be keen to adopt it? And last but not least is the Eminent Task Force. And the Eminent Task Force stands for Ethereum Mainnet Integration for Enterprises. And you'll see some more information around this task force over the next couple weeks. But, you know, just very quickly, this focuses on integration best practices and technical specifications of how integration of systems of record can be done by utilizing the public Ethereum mainnet, which arguably overcomes a lot of the challenges that we mentioned in the first couple slides on, you know, what to do when you have a lot of these private blockchains that are asking you to connect to them. How do you make sure that you can still communicate with all of the other private blockchains that are in the space? Whereas if you were to leverage one blockchain for them all, then maybe there's a way that you can communicate as, you know, one big middle layer, right? So you'll see some more information on this particular initiative over the next couple of weeks. And we just wanted to kind of, you know, make this webinar as a thought-provoking piece so that, you know, we hear what the clients are saying. And, you know, there's some things in the works right now, which is really going to help address all these challenges. So again, you know, thank you for joining. We really appreciate the time. You know, it's really hard to fit all of the things that we want to say and showcase and demo within 30 minutes. One thing that we'll say is that, you know, if anybody wants to talk specifically on any of these challenges that they've seen within their, say, proof of concepts or production rollouts, and you want to, you know, collaborate with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance Mainnet working group, or you want to chat with us privately on, you know, what are the challenges that you're seeing and what are the solutions that we have to kind of help you take you over to the next step, we would definitely love to entertain that call. So please feel free to visit our website here, www.envisionblockchain.com. Send us an email at info@envisionblockchain.com, or just give us a call. And we really hope to hear from you soon.